也得归给西游真真切，苏心的马浪给造化如来巴真尼别巴真马伊鲁巴真巴天巴真给了。连接你别的为等三地，心就你个等心西个呢。你真困的你不能别落，今天面包给我请给了。路上有我去修个心，你的几杯酒我真怕当。修完这走路当的马心，看那人的记性让我了。年半点半年年别走，这心找我能养不完当。给走的主把这把啦，大主把当天把金给了。这边民人的那个一个，一点没人心被困住的。你没人呢，他被的我了，多年前不给我金给了。南大三八第一张八一，天上七星八月全部一。天别撒我所说这话了，主把你不接把金给了。让你自走龙王去行度，满月照我空江天照我，从内照我周围可月为，真修真修修把金给了。身上一张手正能送吧，恐怕没能成就弥足吧。来吧，等你给谁当把啦？怎把这不路把金给了？老辈有来眼望喜觉心，养大等了自信是八一。心内拉动深度的为了嘛，你都给了给我金给了。土木浪长你都给把那。在把根基小有的都接着，加上给我就能当把的，带来你都就玩经济了。带在我这娘你这边西，能当当谁东把送我了。这么明白你把你给你，说到这的送我经济了，带你就给你不给你给，带那去心痛的什么的。真心的说起来没有话，大别是心如把情给了。在大浪上等待千年当，是心如被都能小等心。心难能给把都却别走，你玩去玩情给了就走。给我滚的养大拉马当，这没去给别拉浪之心。撒旦浪给用的让走呢，多谢上帝够换有头手。上给这当所给这南来，上主把这当你叫出去，大一今年的为所能的。这了本是上给主把手，上给这当所给这南来。上主把这当你叫出去，大一今年的为所能的。这了本是上给主把手。上给这当走给这南来，上主把这当你叫出去，大给这些给别所能给，到了本就是上给主把手。萨西不给是谁没到场，瑞巴灵心人的根巴的。上给心都没得偶尔的，若不能到心马这把手，一能不如让他们的拉康尼亚亚米。Okay, so we are close to the end of the first chapter. And should be able to finish it today. Since there are only a few verses left, I'm going to try to do them justice and see how much we can, extract from of the meaning we can extract as we just sort of go over the language and the commentary. So today I think I'm going to try to look a little bit more at Chandrakirti's text, of which Jetsa's commentary is really just a distillation. So just to start with Jetsa's text, we're on page 17, is that right? And so near the bottom of the page it says, following the outline that he created, this point is Drukpa, so it's kind of a series of this, I don't remember the beginning of it, but we can look at it. So this goes back, if you look at the English, I like the outline, actually at the back, it identifies the verses. And so we're on verse now 22, I think. And so verse 22 is, inappropriateness of attachment to the season's marvels. If you go back to A, so this is an expansive explanation by answering objections. And so this is the section heading B, which is kind of this longish second part of the text, was kind of discussed in the context of interestingly, I think, the idea of impermanence, the opposite of developing the sense of the drawing the conclusions from impermanence, meaning to overcome attachment. So this section is not directly addressing the attitude of avoiding thinking about one's mortality, which was kind of the principal obstacle. But here it seems to be addressing more or less the same general subject, but within the context of being attached to family life. And what's interesting is how that ties into the point that comes in the very last verse, or the last two verses or so, where the author, Varyadeva, is essentially saying that if you contemplate your mortality, in his what should I say, in his perspective, in his viewpoint, that should motivate you not only to overcome attachment to this life in a broad sense, which is usually the way it's understood in the Lamrim, right? This is right. So I mean, it's worth addressing that point, which is that there's in renunciation, if you know Tsongkhapa's very influential verse, the Lamso Namso, when he talks about renunciation, right? First of the three topics in that text, there's a form of, quote, renunciation of this life, and then sort of the more conventional idea, which is the renunciation in which you kind of reject any kind of samsaric existence as being desirable. So the first part, which is renunciation relating to this life, it is in the context of the Lamrim tradition, is really critical. They describe that I remember some wording. I think one of the famous Kadampa teachers called Potoa Rinchen himself. He uses a phrase. I think he calls it like the namtik. Namtik means the horizon, and so he uses that sort of that idea or that image as a metaphor for the dividing line,
between Dharma and non-Dharma. So what qualifies from point of view, it says, if you want to determine whether or not your spiritual interests represent a genuine form of Dharma or not, then from the point of view of this overall Lamrim tradition, this is kind of what the way it was presented to me was that you have to, as much as you can, overcome attachment to this life and begin to focus on the consequences of your actions in this life as they pertain to future lives, and turn your attention to that. And so when you're directed towards future lives and away from this life, then that's that kind of most basic form of renunciation. And that's really in the Lamrim, that's the way the idea of meditating on your mortality is kind of focused. This is to overcome attachment to this life. Well, that idea is understandable, but what Aryadeva seems to be kind of taking that or pushing that a little bit further, he's saying overcoming attachment to this life, what it really means is not only being less concerned about the interests of this life, but also in a more radical way, sort of detaching yourself from ordinary samsaric existence, meaning to become, in the ideal sense, a homeless ascetic, which is kind of where the first chapter ends. And so that's that's a kind of, as we've been doing this, and that's kind of something that has struck me about going through the verses of this first chapter is how the topic of mortality is taken in that direction by Aryadeva. So anyway, going back to the outline, so verses 12 through this one, 22, which is 11 verses, which is more than a third of the whole chapter, right? Is addressed this idea of overcoming attachment to living the householder's life, and all of what that entails in terms of how it kind of holds you back from the living the ideal form of spiritual life. So we touched on this last time. I don't want to, I'm not trying to, there's only one person here who's wearing robes, so, I'm not suggesting that, somehow we're, what's the word? We're kind of lost souls, if you like, if we don't, take it, to that extent. But it's interesting how that that's the way that Aryadeva sort of draws out the whole subject, which is, I think it's, I think it's a reasonable, it's a reasonable conclusion to draw, I think. And like someone asked the question, well, what did I think about, the fact that, we're not living the lives of homeless ascetics. And I don't think that means that we're somehow, not able to live up to kind of what the teaching is that's here. So I'm not trying to suggest that, and I just, put that out there as well. Okay, so this is kind of the last verse that is talking about this kind of attachment to, so there's the idea of your family, and then there was this notion, remember we talked about last time, the verse about the four ends. And the one end that is the kind of the broader one is all birth ends in death. And this one is more all meeting or all coming together or all sort of interaction with other beings, whether they're your family members or your friends or whatever, ends in separation. So that's kind of an element of this series of verses. And just sort of to bring us back to where we ended last week, typically the notion of separation is the separation that comes in the extreme form with death. But of course, separation can come in, in other ways as well. We go our separate ways, kind of. That's another kind of separation. But in the previous verse, verse 21, which is the next verse, the one we're going to get to now, sort of is taking those terms of meeting and separation, and he uses those words in a much broader way. So he talks about the infinite past and the potentially infinite future as being the time of separation. That aspect of our existence with which we are not currently in direct contact. So he's saying separation in that sense is infinitely longer than the time of being in contact with others, which would be limited to this life, right? So he takes the term of contact as being the present, or our experiences that we have in our current life. And he says, but why do we think of that? I mean, as the verse kind of talked about it, the verse said something like, why do you, place, why do you give such importance to the idea of the time that you spend with loved ones as being sort of, rich and valuable and, worthwhile, as opposed to thinking of the separation, which is, an unpleasant prospect, but yet, we're able to think of that as less significant in some sense, right? Either we're not experiencing it now, so, out of mind, or, if we're not experiencing it, we can sort of ignore it. But he takes it and he says, well, look, think of separation in terms of, multiple lifetimes. And, that's much longer. So therefore, we should invest that perspective with more importance than this kind of narrow viewpoint of the here and now. And that's really kind of an essence of what the Dharma is about. It's saying that, the here and now, this life, it doesn't deserve the importance in terms of attachment that we give to it. And so we have to overcome that attachment to the here and now. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Are we to dismiss the concept that in our next life we will meet these beings again, but not recognize them or something? Or are we to dismiss the concept that we're nurturing these beings out of building up the virtue or protecting?
Well, which verse was it? I think it was verse 19, if I'm not mistaken. You can look back at it, where he talks about, the idea of, meeting with other people, and that, that's sort of a good thing. He says, there's really nothing that good about it, because as we went, the samsara is sort of in and of itself an unsatisfactory condition. And what we do when we meet with other people and the relationships that we create in meeting with other samsaric beings is that we, in fact, visit our misery on other people, and other people visit their misery on us. And so we're kind of spreading it around. So that's really not anything to, get all, excited about in the first place. There was a particular verse that addressed that topic, right? Okay. So anyway, so this one was saying, the past and the future are, a kind of separation and deserve more consideration in terms of the consequences of that life, that span of time versus the, very minuscule period of our present life. And so he says, we should sort of be able to adopt that larger perspective. And then now we go to the next verse, 22, where he looks more specifically at the present. And I think, I was struck by it as being, again, there's certain verses that, to me, they have that kind of much more impact than others on me personally. So this is section 6 in that longer series of 11 verses, and he says, Dutsik. If you look at this, I'm looking at Jetab's commentary on page 17. Dutsik means time, right? Actually, this word Dutsik means it means time. It means a right time. It means favorable time. So it has this kind of different elements of nuances to it. But the general idea is that the present, what we currently experience as being a time that we view as being particularly favorable, and therefore, we are, taken up by it. We have a strong attachment for it. So here he says, the way the heading of this section is Dutsik, which is being translated as seasons, and it is another, it is one sense of the original Sanskrit word too. It is the seasons, right? Like times of the year in terms of several months together. So Dutsik Punsum Tsokpa, Punsok is short for Punsum Tsokpa. It means sort of the excellence of the seasons, right? So there are elements of the seasons that we think are we think of it as part of our environment, and something about enjoying ourselves, like during the spring is during the fall is this pleasant time of the year, so to speak. So he says that in that sense, time and seasons, excellence of seasons, chakwa mirikwa means we shouldn't be. It's wrong for us to be attached to times in the sense of times of the year that form the present that we are directly experiencing, right? So that's the heading for this verse, and I really like this verse, by the way. So he says this is now looking at the kind of lead in, right? The lead into the verse says separation, jalwa, right? Yun ring means very long, right? So the previous verse that I just talked about, the past and the future, past lives and future lives, is relative to the present life, a much more vast span of time. So, this is sort of, the hypothetical listener is acknowledging, how long those two spans of time are compared to the present. Using young, then he says, and then now he uses words that are words for the specific season, right? So these are examples of Dutsik. So Sarka is a word for spring. And so Metogyeva is when flowers are in bloom. All right. And so that's, typically a time. In fact, there's a word for spring, which refers to spring as sort of season, gladdened, the season of being glad, pleased by the vegetation that kind of comes to life during the spring. And then Tendu here now. So now he gives what is an attribute of the fall. Tendu means the fall. Dawaselwa means, so one of the poetic images is the moon of an autumn sky. And the reason why they say that the moon of an autumn sky is particularly beautiful in India is because it comes right after the rainy season. And so after the rainy season, all the dust that might fill the sky has been sort of settled, and the sky is very clear, so the moon is very beautiful. So kind of in the Indian part of the kind of emotional sort of association with the beauty of the moon in autumn. Dawaselwa means bright moon, sok. So here these two examples are Dutsik Punsum Tsokpa. Dutsik Punsok means, so excellence. These are excellent qualities of the season, right? So then it says dutoki, and then he says here semchine. Now this is an interesting word, chi, because chi, what does chi usually mean? Yeah.
Chi usually means like it's not just spelling for like to. Chi is like a explication.
Yeah, well, that's a word for a kind of text.
Yeah, commentarial.
Right? But where does the meaning come from?
Chi?
Yeah, chiba. Chiba means to lead.
Yeah, right.
Right. So the commentary is something that the teacher leads the students.
Right.
You know, through the explanation.
Right.
But it's here. It's this word which essentially comes from being led. Right? So the mind is led. But fortunately, we do have the original. You know, there are fragments of Chandrakirti's commentary in Sanskrit, which are still there's a published version of it. And so this one is the original. This phrase is in Chandrakirti. I don't know if you have the Chandrakirti in front of you, but this is essentially what Getsabje says here is he's taking directly from Chandrakirti. So he says, Yakete and Jaladrimurki Tanayan Tuzik Punsun Sope Sem Chibe Chur, right? But the word chi is to be captivated.
Oh.
To be in the original Sanskrit is to have the mind sort of overcome by. And that's a notion of attachment, attraction. Sort of the kind of the sense of it is again this idea of attachment to this life, attachment to what you see in front of you, being captivated by the objective world that you come in contact with, and being have your mind sort of be won over by it, and then you give yourself up to it, and by doing so, you are, you're sort of immersing yourself in this life, out of desire and attachment. And so, I mean, that is the very core of the truth of origination. That is what is the ultimate cause of samsaric existence, is finding favor with what we experience, liking what we, the food that we eat, and all the rest of it, right? So he says, so this is where he's saying that even though I acknowledge that past lives and future lives, in terms of just volume of time, are much greater than the present, nevertheless, the present has this sort of extraordinary, attractiveness to it, in the sense of it's right here. I'm experiencing it. It's beautiful, and I like it. And so despite my understanding of the existence of past and future lives, even if I believe in past and future lives, I can't overcome the fact that, I'm captivated by this life. Not a good thing. That's talking about, samsaric attachment in its kind of rawest form. And that's kind of the lead-in that Chandrakirti, describes to the next verse. So he says, then because of that, Joe Dungel me, and this is interesting, this is a little bit confusing, because this says Joe Dungel me, and which it says, literally it's saying, I don't have any suffering of separation. But what it really means is, I'm not thinking about, I don't have the same concern for the fact that, there are future lives, and, what I do in this life will affect them. So I'm not going to think about that, basically. So Jawe Dungel me means I'm not concerned about it. Actually, Chandrakirti's text says something a little bit different. So it's kind of funny that he says that's the way he describes it here. It says, Dela Tsiwa means to give consideration to the future. I don't turn my mind to it. I ignore it basically, and I just stay focused on the here and now. Okay, so that's just setting up the verse in a way that's describing the person who is, completely, helplessly attached to this life. Okay, so now here's the verse. So the verse is now addressing that mindset. Okay, so he says, so he uses a word for time. Okay, time is in the plural actually. So geji latso du de nam. All right, so in the Tibetan, the main noun here is du, and it means time as in intervals of time. So intervals of time, all right, and then the verse begins by saying, which are made up by such things as moments and so forth. And so and so forth is all the other terms that represent intervals of time. Moment is the shortest interval of time. Then there's, moment or brief period of time or an hour or, a day or a week. These are all intervals of time. So those intervals of time, right? Then here it says, never dradan drar jurte. Okay, so this is the first half of the verse. Jurte is a sort of a form of the verb to be, right? Are like, right? So intervals of time are, and then it says dradan drar. Dradan drar means like enemies, right? So an enemy is, so let's get the language first. Actually, the Sanskrit, which we have for this verse, is not a verb is, per se. It's a verb of motion. It's a verb of going. It's a verb of passage or advances. So it says time, marches, or time passes, right? Intervals of time pass, intervals which are made up of, here our interval of time is the 3 hours that we spend here today, right? Other intervals of time that we recognize. Like when you do something, right? Whenever you wake up in the morning and you think, well, what am I going to do today, right? So then you formulate an idea of how you're going to spend your time. You're going to pick some sort of an event that you're going to do, and it's going to play out over some interval of time, right? So what he's saying in this first verse is that all of those intervals of time are not just fluid, but they're passing, they're going, they're not staying. There's no persistence to them. When they go, they're gone. When they're gone, they're forever gone. And therefore, he uses the simile, they are like an enemy. Okay. Now, it doesn't say yet why they're like an enemy, but the use of that simile is to contrast that with the way Chandrakirti described the person who's attached to the present, right? You're attached to the present not because you think of it as in some way, hostile or antithetical. Quite the opposite. You're very comfortable with it. You like it. You enjoy yourself. The normal, well-adjusted person, is happy with their life, kind of thing. And so he's telling you something that is, kind of directly opposed to that, saying actually the way you spend your time, the way time goes by over your lifetime is like an enemy, right? So that's the assertion in the first half of the verse, okay? Now, then he says, let's see, how should we do it? Let's finish the verse. He says, therefore, he says, so to make the assertions like an animal, we haven't really fleshed that out, but you know, that's suggesting that the present is not so, the time that we spend in the present is not so, you know, purely favorable or enjoyable or something to be complacent about. He says, therefore, dena means as a consequence of that, meaning as a consequence of it being like an enemy, okay, so now he uses the same word, enemies, and he says, which are enemies. Because he's saying times, those intervals of time towards those intervals, those what's another word? Let's say enemies, but so those sorry?
Opponents?
Well, I think it's more the idea that, you know, an enemy is someone who poses a threat, right? So they're harmful, right? The passage of time is harmful. Okay. Namgun means towards those harmful passages of time, in every way. This is no, but it's in the negative. So in no way should you be attached. Okay. So basically, what he's saying is now there's nothing about the present, there's nothing about this life that we should feel attachment for. Okay. Now, you know, that's like a very what should I say? You know, forceful proposition. So now let's see how Chandrakirti and Gesabje sort of describe them, and I think it's really quite poignant. So let's see. Go to the next page. So he says. He says, okay, so here, well, I'm going to show you a little bit how Gesabje doesn't include all of the richness of Chandrakirti's explanation. Okay, so here we go. Echik is instant, right? That's the one that's in the verse, right? That's why it's underlined. So instant is, you know, it's subtle impermanence. It's our being at the level of subtle impermanence that only lasts for an instant. Then tangchik is another term which means a short moment of time, but it's longer than an instant. Okay, and then he says yutsam means a little bit more than that, sort of a brief period of time, right? A moment, a brief period of time, something like that. La sope. So these are just fleshing out what. And so forth means that, you know, time is measured in different units, right? Dudena means those periods of time. He says they rimgi pelwa. Rimgi pelwa means they gradually become more and more, you know, long, right? So you put together a bunch of instants, it adds up to something. More, you know, identifiable. We can't actually experience our being at the level of an instant, but if you put enough instants together, you know, then we have something that is perceptible, right? And not only is it perceptible, he says, and now here he says, because of that, right? Because of the fact that time sort of builds and, you know, becomes a significant, you know, amount of time, and it represents something, a passage of something, an ending of something. So it means the shortening of your life, right? So Chiki Stembe Gechik. So it says Chiki. This is Ari David talking to, you know, this householder who's attached to this life. He says your life, your period of being alive, Samba, which, remember, there was another verse which I forget the number. I could, you know, sleep through it. There was one verse in which he described the state of being alive as being nothing more than a series of instants. So you're really only alive for an instant, and then, you know, another instant comes along, and you're alive for that instant. So here he said.
No, just that I remember that it's the living being is just an instant of mind.
Right, correct. So here he says, now, he says kind of harking back to that. He says, means the moments of your life or your state of being alive in this life, okay, so that's why time is an enemy, right? It is using up the moments of life that you happen to have. So with each passing moment of time, your life is being used up a little bit, okay? And then he says, therefore, okay, so means to show reason. Because of that, never means then here it says, for that reason, it's definitely the case, right? That time is like an enemy, right? It's saying that, you know, as with each passing moment of time, your life is becoming shorter and shorter. It's like, you know, sand going through the hourglass, right? So he says, therefore time, and he uses this word, is like an enemy in the sense that it is literally seizing your life. Stealing your life. Stealing your life means ending your life. It's slowly bringing your life to an end. So it says, as time passes, that's a dharmic way of thinking of the passage of time. That with each passing moment, your life is slowly slipping away. Therefore, every moment that you experience, every moment that goes by, every moment that ends, really should be thought of as something that is kind of squeezing you, all right? Is you know, boxing you in closer and closer to your death. And so, in that sense, don't be attached to what's going on as time is clicking by in the here and now. What you should really be thinking about is every moment that I have has some potential of spiritual value, and if I squander it, I'm a fool, right? So it's saying, but that's not the direct message, that's sort of what's implied. But the direct message is to think of the passage of time as, you know, taking away what potential you had to do something spiritually valuable with this life. So every moment that's passing, you know, your level of anxiety should be, you know, getting higher. And therefore, you shouldn't be, you know, you shouldn't let yourself be sucked in by the appearance of, you know, samsaric beauty, so to speak, right, in the present. So that's kind of the verse. That idea of it's an enemy in the sense that it is, you know, stealing away your life as time passes. So the idea is, you know, I think this verse in particular is sort of, it's like I said, it's harking back to that other verse saying that your life really consists of, you know, moments of your five skandhas that are, you know, always, you know, changing from moment to moment. That was the previous verse. This verse is saying, and by the way, that continuous process of changing is not open-ended. That continuous process of changing definitely has an end point. And so as you're, so this is what I get out of this is one of the points that I get out of this verse, or this whole chapter is, we are, you know, the average, what should I say, you know, sort of the ordinary person, right? We use the tamelpa, right? The sosokyo tamelpa, right? The non-Arya, the average non-Arya, such as we are, is such that we have, as we experience our very being, right? So I mean, in a way, Dharma, the purpose of Dharma is to bring us to a point where we see the nature of our being as it truly is, right? I mean, that's the goal, right? Perceiving selflessness is our true state of being. We don't see that. So how do we normally look at ourselves? We look at ourselves as, in fact, real persons, which is a fiction, right? Not only that, we perceive our existence as something that persists. So there's what is the word? It's not kinetic, but it's a word that's something like kinetic, where we have a certain sense of our there's a kind of almost like a tangible feeling quality to our experience, right? A lot of
Kinesthetic?
Huh?
Kinesthetic?
Yeah, right. So the idea we can feel our limbs, right? We can feel our bodies. We can and to a large extent we identify our being with that experience. Okay. So that's our sort of fundamental sense of ourselves.
Is that also proprioceptive?
Mm-hmm.
Proprioceptive, where we feel our body in space?
Somewhat, yeah, but the kinesthetic was the word that I was looking for. So the quality of our kinesthetic experience is not one where we have this idea that we're sort of like, going instant to instant, changing, popping in and out of existence. That's not part of it. Our kinesthetic experience is that there's a certain quiet, there's a certain sort of ongoing persistence to it. Well, that's one element of our being that is meant to be overcome by impermanence, right? So in order to kind of replace that kind of unrefined or uninformed kinesthetic experience, we have to cultivate an understanding that will give us a different perspective, and that's what the doctrine, that is the effect that learning the doctrine of subtle impermanence will have. Is if we think about it, and if we focus on it, and if we contemplate it, and then we sort of, apply it to our own state of being, it'll take on a different kinesthetic quality, right? So we'll see ourselves as a being, okay, which is constantly subject to change, and that condition of change is something over which we have this much control, and it's moving, farther and farther away from, when we were young and healthy, and it's moving closer and closer to when we breathe our last breath, and that's going on every single moment. So therefore, if we have that kind of awareness about our existence, it takes on a totally different, it should and can take on a totally different, quality to it. And that is that every moment that passes is a moment that is gone forever, and which, if we didn't make use of it, was squandered. And so so like it or not, time is passing, and we either make the most of it or we don't. But it's going, whether we like it or not. And the fact that it's going is not working in our favor; it's working against us. So therefore, don't stop and smell the roses too much. Okay, like that. Right?
It was beautifully put.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a pretty strongly worded, it's like a yikes moment, right? It should be. And there is all this, this is all part of, the renunciation. Like renunciation, in order to have renunciation, in order to have real renunciation, full-blown form, really, vivid and, strongly affecting form, you really have to know about subtle impermanence. You have to know about what's unsatisfied. This is getting into the realm of the suffering of conditioned existence. It's saying that, time is passing, we have no control over it, and the fact that it is going in that way and we have no control over it, if we don't do anything about it with what little time we do have, the prospects are not really great. So that's a getting in the direction of understanding the suffering of conditioned existence. And that's very different from what I was saying was that kinesthetic experience that the average, samsaric person gets up with in the morning and sort of sees himself or herself and what the day sort of presents to you. So, this is the kind of thing that is meant to sort of, alter the way in which you see your life. So that's it's very closely tied to the notion of chiwamitapa, right? The impermanence of your mortality. But in here, Aryadeva is investing it with that idea of subtle impermanence, which I think gives it a lot more sort of, power to the point. And I think something that you can, if you read the verses, effectively, really, the message comes through loud and clear, or it should. Okay, so that's this verse. I find this verse particularly effective. All right. So then now we kind of, let's see. So yeah, he says never never yurte. So he says this is a Chandakirti. He's talking about that the fact that our lives are slowly being brought to an end by the passage of time. He says never yurte means that's a fixed state. There's something that nothing we can do about that. That's the way it is. Wake up to it and do what you can with that understanding. Then he makes a conclusion. This is now Chandakirti giving the in his commentary. He says, because of that, those moments of time which are in fact stealing away your life, right? And for that reason are therefore your enemies. The passage of time is, as time, once it has passed, it has, taken something that you can never get back, right? Therefore, those moments of time means those moments of time that we see for a fleeting moment as the present, but once they're gone, they're gone. He says, don't get attached to it. That's what the verse ends, right? Therefore, in no way should you feel any attachment for the here and now. No attachment to the present, right? Because all it's doing is really confronting you with your mortality as it goes by. Okay, so Joanna le minuvadam jebendagi nyeve. Oh yeah. So then now he gives an example. The story here is of a servant woman, right? The servant woman is Gamo. Here it just says Gamo. Gamo means old woman, but in the it's coming from Chandakirti, but in Chandakirti he doesn't just say old woman. He says Drenmo Gemo. Dren means servant. Drenmo means a female servant. Okay, so this is someone who is, well, servant is a servant, right? It means that they don't have say over how they spend their time. They're in servitude to their, the house, the lord of that family, or in this case, he uses the word mistress. And so he says, Jemo. So it says, Jemo, he says, the example is like this. And so what's really interesting about these stories is they give a picture which kind of creates an image that captures the essence of the verse. So that's the value of these stories. Okay. So here the image is the old woman. So in this case, you're the old woman, right? You're the old woman who's a servant. Okay, servant is someone who is like a samsara, someone who is in bondage to samsara in that sense. And then it says, Jemo means mistress, right? Je is the Lord, and it's in the feminine, so it means the mistress, the woman who is, gives orders or how the household is to be taken care of. Then that mistress, Dunel Kormorke. So in this sort of what do they call it? In poetry, they call it a what's the way? The word is an expanded image.
Allegory?
No, it's
Metaphor?
huh? No, it's a conceit.
A conceit.
Conceit means that it's a complex image. It has a lot of elements to it. Okay, so he says the mistress of the house is continually. There's a typo here. It says kormar. It should be kormor. Kormor means without stopping all the time, continually creating suffering. So she's, in other words, the work that she is giving to her servant is such that the servant is always struggling, right? In not a pleasant. Her life is not pleasant, right? It's hard. The hard work of a servant who is given menial and painful and difficult tasks to do. Again, all that's part of the idea is samsaric existence is we toil in our samsaric state. So nevertheless, he says, nevertheless, this servant woman, Jemo la chakbarche. Jemo la chakbarche means for whatever reason, maybe she feels like, well, at least the woman feeds me and gives me a roof over my head, so I have to, at the very least, you have to tolerate it. Here it's saying that this poor, ignorant servant woman, even looks up to this mistress who, gives her a lot of painful tasks to do. So that's like, we, lowly samsaric beings have an attachment for the painful existence of samsara that we continually undergo. Nyangin mijewa. Nyangin mijewa means she doesn't feel any literally sorrow, but more like, but she's not unhappy. She's sort of resigned to her status as a servant, and so that's the idea of being complacent about your samsaric condition. That is totally, from the point of view of Dharma, inappropriate, unacceptable, misguided, wrong-headed, however you want to describe it. Therefore, dutsig la chakbe jikteng bayang dedan zhao. So here it says dutsig means seasons. So the external environment that we look upon favorably, right? Dutsig la chakba means we are attached to it. Jiktemba means the worldly person, means the samsaric person is like that. Okay? Nice, huh? Yeah.
Something is coming to mind that I just wanted to share. This reminds me from a different tradition where there's some kind of a joke about what does it take to change a light bulb, and it's something.
You mean how many people does it take to change it?
I don't know, maybe somebody remembers better. Something about people just sitting there and doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the same concept as, if you think of life as impermanent, you'll act sooner.
Right.
And so everywhere in the world, we sometimes let problems go on much too long.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I think here kind of the main sort of what the spotlight is on is the ordinary person's misguided attachment for his or her life. Saying, oh, life is okay. Life is not all that bad. I like it here. You know, New York is a nice city to live in. I'm happy here. I like going to the museums. You know, I like going to the movies.
Can't take that away from me. But it's the same thing, really. You're sitting, you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Someone will take care of the light bulb.
Oh.
And you.
Well, the idea of that, you know, that I don't have to worry because life will be taken care of. I don't know that that's really the message. The message is you know, sort of be more you know, be more concerned about, you know, the passage of your life, because it's once it's gone forever, lost, not to be retrieved.
But by making, I'm not a good joke teller, but by making someone laugh at the fact that someone does, you know, doesn't do something.
Doesn't worry about it because somebody else will take care of it, you mean?
I'll look it up.
Okay.
Because I don't know exactly. But the idea is that if you laugh about it, you'll realize it's much more sensible to do something about the problem now. Well,
I mean, I think I laughed at a couple of the stories in this verse here, you know, that I thought they were, you know, that's a kind of a sardonic laughter, I think. Anyway. Okay. So let's see. I think that's about what I can get out of this verse. So it says, in the same way, he's using the language, jikten by yang. Actually, he uses the word jikten. There's a difference between jikten and jikten ba, right? And Geshe text has jikten ba. Jikten ba means worldling, right? A individual. But jikten means world, and that's what it is in Chandrakirti's text. And the world is meant as a collective noun, means everybody that is part of samsaric existence, ordinary beings, you know, in their totality. Chakwa yinte means, for the most part, I mean, if you take how many people would find what we're doing here today as a meaningful thing to do, there's an awful lot more who think that, you know, we're nuts, right? And why are we wasting our time when we could be out there having so much fun, right?
I'm sorry, I found the joke.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, there's actually two versions here. How many people does it take to change a light bulb for a Jewish mother?
Oh.
None, darling. I'll sit in the dark.
Oh, okay.
There's another one. How many Jewish mothers does it take to change a light bulb? Don't worry about your mother. You go have a good time. I'll just sit in here in the dark.
All right, but those are like.
I mean, that's another way of trying, but this seems more effective.
Yeah. Okay. The Jewish mother, right?
In this case.
Okay, so it says, all right, so that's 1 point. Jikten. Jikten, where was it? Oh, I lost my place here. Oh yeah, so he gives an example here. He says about seasons. He says during the hot season, right? Now it's a little bit of a twist. It's saying before it was kind of the way the lead-in was that we find the seasons just, you know, appealing to us. Here at the end, this is not in Geshe. This is only in Chandrakirti. He says the way we react to our environment is, and this is sort of a this is kind of a different a little bit of a different twist. It says so it says whenever we, like in the hot season, right? When we're oppressed and, feeling, uncomfortable, then we long for, the time when the weather is cooler. And so that's introducing the idea of another way in which our attachment sort of is triggered. So even when we experience things in our life that are unpleasant, so one of the ways that we respond to it is we tell ourselves about another more favorable kind of time, and we long for it. And so that's sort of another way of increasing our attachment. So there's it's kind of when everything is fine, when everything we like it, we're attached to that. And even when it isn't nice, we figure out a way to take that, and it's just sort of another variation of our attachment to samsaric existence. Number two, okay, this is kind of the way Chandrakirti ends this verse. I think I have it here. Let's see if I can find it. All right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is sort of, again, before he described, how we shouldn't be. We shouldn't have attachment. That's what the verse says. Think of all time as being an enemy. So then he says here, therefore, right, this is his final concluding statement. He says, Dujeki chini dak. Duje means samskaras. Samskaras means all of the observable elements of experience, right? Our physical being is one part of our samskaras. Then our internal mental world, those are also samskaras. The external world, it means everything that is causally produced, and therefore by virtue of its being causally produced, everything which is momentary, right? So he says, he says, Dujeki chuni means that nature of all causally produced things. And here he's not talking about emptiness. He's talking about the fact that everything is momentary. So he says, it is everywhere. It's all pervasive. And he says, reflect on that. Okay? So basically he's saying, bring to mind the idea of subtle impermanence as being all pervasive. And then he says, okay, this is a word. Semshin yi gyoarju. Yi gyoa means, this is a word, samvigna. There's a samvega is the noun which is translated into Tibetan as gyoa, right? Which in ordinary Tibetan means sadness, but in Dharma context it means disaffection and alarm and concern. Sort of it's a kind of agitation. It's the opposite of being complacent. It's being sort of to be sort of worked up, mentally agitated, a sort of feeling I have to do something. I have to do something, right? So he says, with that kind of a mind which feels a sense of alarm, right, about the present, rather than attachment, right? Then he says, then this is at the very end, he says, Jesu tumbe jeba rikso means yutam anurupam acharitu. So I should act in a way that is proper and in a way that is in keeping with this understanding, right? So I mean, it's just a nice kind of way of ending the message of the verse. Okay, so anyway, I said I was going to spend a little extra time on the individual verses. So that's the first verse. That was an hour and 15 minutes. So. All right, let's see what we can do with the rest of it. Okay, so now we're up to 23, right? Okay. Oh yeah, this is a good one too. All right, so this one is now we're into the third section of the outline. This is, I think, now sort of the kind of culmination of the first chapter, right? And we have here C, right? So, all right, this is verse 23. We're now the last three verses, right? 23, 4, and 5. This is C. And this whole section is, the heading is advice to make effort to practice the path to liberation, right? Sumba. I know, that's right. Okay, you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a so saying all the 22 verses up to here have been discussing how we are attached to wrongful behavior, right? This life's activities, right? So it says Fangnian means by understanding this series of verses, then that should enable us to overcome that attachment. And having done so, then it doesn't end there. So we should do something proper. And the proper thing is Tarbe Lam Druva. Tarbe Lam Druva means we should strive to practice the path to liberation. Tarbe Lam Druva La Zamba. Zamba means we should make effort to practice that path. Damba means the last three verses are kind of advice or instruction. Okay. So this has two parts to it. Nyabarcha Gerba Che Lela Dabar Mirik Pata. Okay. Now this verse is again talking about this notion of separation, right? And now we're going back to that. Oh, good. This is kind of taking the notion of separation in a little bit of a different direction, right? So the kind of the samsaric aspect of separation is, to be separated from your dear ones by death. Okay. Here it's taking a different kind of separation. You have to abandon them in order to pursue the spiritual life. Turn your back on your family in order to go out and, dedicate yourself to a spiritual life. That's a kind of separation. You're leaving your family behind, right? And so this is saying that you don't do that. You don't go forth. You don't leave your family life because of the fear, quote, fear of separation, meaning the idea of separating yourself from your family is unappealing to you, right? Okay, so that is that, and then what he's saying is you have the opportunity to abandon your family and all the attachments that entails, and that prevents you from pursuing the Dharma. You have the opportunity, you have the possibility of doing that while you're still healthy and alive, and yet you won't do it. You don't do it. You feel constrained against doing it, and yet, guess what? When you die, you're going to be separated anyway. So you know that, and you're not going to have any control over that. You have some ability to consciously separate yourself now in a way that will be of some value to you. Whereas if you allow the separation to come in the samsaric way, which is, to be, to die, you die, or your loved one dies, or, like that, over which you have no control. Here you have the ability to make the choice, and yet you're apprehensive about it, so you don't do it. There's a message there. The message there is, sort of for us in a very real way, is what deters us from practicing the Dharma, right? What excuses, in fact, do we, present to ourselves as reasons why we're not going to do it right now? We like it. We like the idea. It sounds appealing. The idea of pursuing the Dharma, gives meaning to life, but that's not right now. Or I have something else to do. I'm going to do that, instead for now. I can make jokes. I don't want to make jokes, but that's a very real thing. I can even say something further about that. I remember someone who the first thing is that most of us find ourselves in our lives where we don't have the time, right? We have obligations, whatever it is. Maybe we have a job. If we didn't have a job, we wouldn't be able to pay our bills. If we didn't have to pay our bills, we wouldn't be able to take care of ourselves. And so that takes a big chunk of our time, right?
Yes.
So that's an issue. But we have other things that can come up. Here's my point. My point is that whatever our own individual situation is, right? However we choose to live our lives kind of in the larger sense, right? How we what sort of life path we're on, we get we get some what should I say? Some sort of taste of the Dharma, or we get some sort of inkling of what the Dharma represents, right? Then the Dharma is, what the thing about the Dharma is, it's not a passive enterprise. A certain part of it is. The part where you're learning to some degree is something where you have to receive something from somebody else, and so basically what you do is you have to sit there while the instruction is being given. However, it's really not passive, because you have to make some effort to get yourself there to receive that instruction, and that's an active, element. But the point is that once you have some kind of knowledge of Dharma, right? The real Dharma comes when you start to try to cultivate it, and you start to try to, quote, internalize it, or bring it to life in yourself. That's the real Dharma, okay? And that requires its own, opportunity. You have to set aside, you have to find, you have to make time to be able to do that, right? Nobody's going to, I don't know of anybody that comes along and says, oh, don't worry about it. I'm going to make this perfect environment for you to pursue the Dharma. That doesn't really, that's a fantasy. The closest thing to it, if you want to be, realistic about it, the closest thing to it is to be born into a Buddhist culture and to form the idea to go and be a monk or a nun, and presumably that gives you the greatest opportunity. Okay, so we're not there. We're not living in that kind of a society. We don't have those kinds of institutions that really are readily available for us. But that doesn't mean we were lost. But what it really means, and I'm not talking friend to friend, living in this country is whatever, exposure you've had to the Dharma, for you to make something of it, it's up to you to, in your own mind, make the determination that you're going to find the time. You're going to make the time. You're going to figure out how to, arrange for some period of time where you don't have to do anything else. And you can, in fact, sit down and, practice, right? So that's the challenge. That's a real challenge for every one of us as Dharma students. That's a big deal. And over the last, 40 some years, almost going more than 40 years, that's the thing that I've observed most about fellow Dharma students is that's tough. And the thing of it is, nobody's going to do that for you. Nobody's going to do that for you, except yourself. So that's a huge challenge. And I just want to put that out there, from my own, little experience is, that's on you. Okay. So this verse is saying, what took me off on that tangent is the fact that this verse is saying, it says longen, right? Longen, I'm reading the verse now. Well, let's start at the beginning. He says, Danguni, right? The first one is, so never chagaba means, like it or not, you're going to be separated from your dear friends and from your own body, even for that matter. And when that happens, this life is gone, right? So that separation is coming, and it has to be done, right? Chagaba means that separation is inevitable. Then he says, given that fact, don't wait until that separation is imposed upon you by your own biology, right? Separate yourself from samsaric, distractions, whether it's family or whatever it is, and the things that are, antagonistic to the Dharma practice. Do what you can now to separate yourself from those distractions and those things that prevent you from pursuing the Dharma, so that you can, and don't let that, that kind of, I'll give you an example. Sometimes people are working in a job that they hate, right? And they don't leave it. Why? A lot of times because they're not sure if they can find a better job or not, or any job for that matter. And so that fear of, not finding something to be better than what they're currently in makes them stay in that situation, right? So, that's in your own mind. I did that myself. I was in a job a long time ago that, was not very satisfying, to say the least. And, I stayed in that situation for a number of years. And finally, when I had enough, I just said, I don't care. I didn't have any, well, I do a bunch of personal baloney, but I walked away without having the slightest idea of what else I might be able to do. And to my, surprise, amazement, I was able to find an opportunity to be doing what I'm doing now, and I've been doing for the last, 15 years or so, where I actually have an income that allows me to pursue the Dharma, translating and doing it at home. And, I may not be practicing as I just described, but I'm certainly putting a lot of my time, I have freedom to put a lot of time into the Dharma. And, so there was a certain fear that kept me from taking that leap, prior to that. And so there's a similar kind of fear that restrains you from, deciding to pursue the Dharma on a more, in a more, fuller way, or in a way where you're more devoted to it. Now, okay, I said that. Okay, so that's what this next verse is about. Just let me give you the flip side of that. The flip side of that is there's something that's talked about. I remember many of the people, none of the people that are here remember our teacher Ken Rinpoche. And he used to talk about something. It was not unique. It was a term, but he used the term. It's called Minjung Pusu. Do you know that term? Remember that term? It's a notion. The word Minjung means renunciation. Renunciation is this idea of, I've been exposed to the Dharma. The Dharma is wonderful. I can't think of anything better, and I'm going to throw myself into it, 100%. So you can have that kind of reaction to the Dharma when you first encounter it. So that reaction is sometimes referred to as this Minjung Pusu. Minjung Pusu means goosebumps, right? Which means that sometimes it's an element of experience that sometimes that your hair stands on end when you're there's a certain kind of excitement or even sometimes a kind of reverence. You have a feeling that so there can be that this is meant in a sort of pejorative way that some people, when they initially react to the Dharma, they seem very eager and wanting to pursue it. Like, I want to become a monk, or I want to become a nun, or I want to go meditate in a cave. Sort of that extreme ideal of what it is. But what you don't realize is that the Dharma, there's a certain kind of down-to-earth aspect to living the life of the Dharma. And when the rubber meets the road, sometimes when you're faced with those obstacles or those things which don't allow you to just be you can fantasize about being a Dharma student, or you can actually be a Dharma student, and those are not the same thing. So when you're trying to be a Dharma student and you encounter certain difficulties, whether it be that you don't have any means of financial support, or that you have some kind of physical difficulties, or anything like that, and then at some point you say, oh, well, I gave it a shot, it just didn't work out, and then you abandon it. Well, the fact that you are willing to abandon it is an indication that you didn't really have the steadfastness that really is a necessary element of actually living that life all the way through as much as you can. So that's kind of the flip side of not taking the leap in the first place. Okay, but that just brings you back to the idea of what's the middle way? How do you resolve those two extremes? Okay, so this verse is about the other extreme, the idea of sort of being, having trepidation about engaging in the Dharma. Some people, one of the things that people do is they say, I remember I had similar thoughts to this myself. It was like, oh, Arya Dev or Nagarjuna, we're talking about people from, close to 2,000 years ago. And, maybe they could live that kind of life. Maybe they could have those kinds of realizations. But here we are in, the 21st century or whatever it is. And, it's just not really realistic to think that it's possible to do that anymore. That's a kind of sense of discouragement that one can face. And, I caution against that. I actually had that conversation with my teacher. And, his response to me was basically, don't worry about it, that you can accomplish anything, basically. And that lifted my spirit. So anyway, okay, so let's see what I'm going to do. This is verse 23, right? So it says, so this is, don't wait for, your body to, prevent you from pursuing the Dharma. Separate yourself from your attachments while you still can and pursue the Dharma. Okay, so he says, this is beginning this verse. He's saying, what you just said, that's true, that's right. In other words, I shouldn't be attached to this life, right? I shouldn't be attached to this life, but means it's difficult for me, in fact, to walk away or to, turn my back on my family, right? That gao means it's just emotionally, I can't bring myself to do it. De jingye means then, because of that trepidation, because of that fear, concern, naksu mindro, then he says, you don't go to the forest. To go to the forest is this classic Indian idea of the forest is where you live the ascetic life, rather than in society, in the town, where all the samsaric beings are found. Okay, so that addressing that, right? The person who has that kind of resistance or that kind of lack of confidence, even to a certain degree, one of the things about life in general, I don't want to sound like I'm giving you advice or anything, but one of the things about our lives is that, really when you come right down to it, you're alone. You are alone in life. You come into this life on your own. You leave this life on your own. So that private aspect of your being, which nobody else is experiencing, but's going on inside your own mind, you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be willing to, from that perspective, make decisions, irrespective of the people that are around you. And, that's not callous. That doesn't have to be callous. That doesn't have to mean that you are, dismissing any concern for your country. Need I say, Buddha Shakyamuni was married, had a child, and walked away, right? So nobody faults the Buddha for having done that.
Art?
Yeah.
You said in the city were the samsaric beings, but in the forest they were not samsaric beings? How can you...
No, the idea is that in order to try to live the life that promotes the attainment of liberation from samsara, the way the ideal is to go and separate yourself from society. And typically in India, originally the Buddha's followers, they didn't live in monasteries. They lived in sort of forested areas or parks, and those were meant to be a certain distance away from where the townspeople lived. They were not in the midst of a town. In fact, they were obliged to live outside of that.
So they're also away from the things that they have greater attachment to.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, well, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to spout too much of my own personal views. Okay, so this is saying you feel some inability to basically, you want to say metaphorically or literally, take the step where you're willing to sort of arrange your life in such a way that you can live the Dharma as fully as possible, because it would require you to kind of sever your relationships with some individuals. It may require that. And, so you can't bring yourself to do it. And if that's the case, now, by the way, one of the themes that is here is that I mentioned this, I touched on this before. Buddhism does not, historically, going back to the time of Buddha, Buddhism did not suggest that you ought to wait until you fulfill your social obligations to live or pursue some kind of spiritual life, right? There was the four sort of aims, last of which is moksha. Moksha means liberation. So you cannot actually dedicate yourself in the what's the word? In the classic Indian kind of Brahmanical or Vedic sort of context, there's 4 stages of life. The last one is you're not allowed to pursue that until you fulfill the other 3. The third one is dharma, and dharma is your obligation to society, right? And to some degree, fulfilling your family obligation. Buddhism says, no, we don't espouse that fact. As we said, Buddha walked away at a young age from his family, and you can enter the sangha at I gave an example of a very young age. You could even even a teenager could do so with parental permission. So that's part of what's being said here. It's part of what Aryadeva was addressing. After all, this is not that far removed from the time of the Buddha, 400 or 500 years. Okay. All right. So now, looking at the verse, it says longen. Right? Longen means literally means inferior mind. Right? And this is in the vocative, meaning that it's Aryadeva speaking to the foolish samsaric person, right? So this longen should be taken to mean fool, right? So fool, if you're foolish, your thought not to leave your family, situation because you can't bring yourself to separate yourself from your dear ones. So Jawe Jigbai means because of your fear of separation. Kimne means the home, right? The home householder's life. Kimne never minjung means you don't depart, you don't leave. You don't leave the home because of your fear of separation. Fool, you who do not leave your home out of, concern or separating yourself from your family members. Then he says, the why in keva, keva is opposite of the fool, right? Keva means, here it means an intelligent person, right? Actually, keva, because keva is sometimes pandita, right? But here it's translating buddhaha. Buddhaha means an intelligent person, more generically. What intelligent person, right? So the contrast between what's described in the first half of the verse. What intelligent person? Rhetorical question, right? What intelligent person? Right? Then it says, never jagar. Never jagar means what has to be done. So what has to be done is you give it up in the end, right? So remember in the, I don't want to sound like I'm quizzing you, but the Chiwamitaka, right? Mm-hmm. There's three Zawa Sum, right? Yeah. What's the Sumba? No. It's a Chomato.
Oh, that you have to practice the Dharma. That's the only thing that's going to help you at the end. Is going to be the Dharma.
Sure. So when you die, when you actually come to the end of your life, the only thing that's going to ensure that your life had any purpose, right, is what you accomplished in your spiritual, endeavors, right? And so, what are the examples that they give?
He makes it actually.
There are 3. So that's the third category, the root category, and then within the root category there are 3 gyutsens. Gyutsen means the 3 sort of points. Right. Gyutsen usually means reasons, but here there's 3 points, 3 instances where the things that you concern yourself about in your life, that you can become, distracted by, but which will really only, prevent you from accomplishing the Dharma. 3 things.
Possessions.
Yeah. Longzhe.
Right.
Longzhe means, your wealth, right?
And
so
family.
We spend our time, trying to, put away money for our golden years, right? So all the time, no matter how much we manage to put away for that, that whatever time and effort we spent doing that, whatever amount of money we have, we can, pile up around our body when we're on our deathbed, that money ain't going to do you no good, number one. Number two is your family and friends. You know, they could be surrounding you and wailing and, you know, begging you not to go, but you're gone, right? And then, you know, what's number three?
Your body.
Your own body, right? So that separation, those stuff, are you going to be separated from whatever wealth you have, no matter how much or how little wealth you have. At some point, you're going to leave it behind. No matter who your friend, how many friends you have, or how big your family is, you know, when you go, and you go alone. And when you go, you don't even get to take your physical body, right? We were reading an article this morning about composting as a new way of disposing of funerals, which I thought was really quite enlightened. Well, enlightened, but whatever, green, environmentally sound, right? So it says, never jaga. Never jaga here says something that needs to be done. What intelligent person would do what needs to be done, right? What needs to be done means to become separated from this life, to become separated from those examples that I gave. Forcefully. It says chebe. Chebe means by punishment, literally. But it's actually the Sanskrit word is, it uses the word danda. Danda means the rod. So then it's in the instrumental, means by here it means by force, violently, right? By biologically, by dying, you have to be separate. What person would wait to separate himself or herself from the rest of this life by his or her death, right? Rather than separating himself or herself from those things that are preventing you from pursuing the Dharma. Prior to that time, doing it, freely, right? Doing it consciously, doing it intelligently, saying enough already. Samsara sucks. I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to do something that will, bring me closer, if possible, to freedom.
Isn't this like the classic argument that's used to promote the monastic life?
Well, I mean, he certainly means it that way.
Yeah,
he does mean it that way. He's typically leaving the household, right? So here he's mocking the fool, calling the person fool for being afraid to separate himself or herself from his family or her family, right? Mm-hmm. Consciously, willingly, freely, intelligently, and rather waiting for that to happen in a way that one has no control over. And it just, you're a victim of separation, rather than doing it in a way that can be valuable. That's the verse. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm thinking about that. A parallel, perhaps less extreme example of that might be when you get sick.
Yeah.
And you learn something. You think about something that you might not have had that not occurred.
Well, you mean that sickness can sometimes sort of become and give you an incentive in terms of not wasting your time because it's a reminder of the fragility of life. Is that what you mean?
Well, maybe you realize when you're sick that you haven't been taking care of yourself the way you should.
Oh.
But if you hadn't gotten sick, you wouldn't have that lesson. Sometimes it's...
Yeah, sure. I mean, everybody, right. Like near-death experiences often are kind of like wake-up calls and things like that.
Doesn't have to be near-death.
No, but I'm saying that's a more extreme example. Yeah?
My relationship with my mom always improved when I got sick. I learned something about each of us.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right. Let me see. I definitely going to finish this today. So this is verse number 2. Okay. Okay, so here it says Wemba means Remba means separation, right? Viveka means isolation. It means separation from society, right? So, you know, it's like a place where you meditate. It's called Wene, right? Wemba tembe chedu means in order to resort. Temba here means to take advantage of or to, you know, to pursue isolation or separation. Chimne never means if you fail to leave the household state because of your fear of separation. Nyenshe tanjawa deni means that separation from your friends and family. Chidagi never cheve means the Lord of Death. It means actually your own mortality will definitely impose it on you, right? It's going to happen whether you want it to or not. Therefore, then he says, Keba Sushik means what intelligent person. And so he glosses intelligent person as Langdorla Keba. An intelligent person is someone who is able to be able to comprehend what to avoid and what to pursue, what to take up. So the avoid is to avoid engaging in inappropriate behavior, and the take up is to cultivate those qualities that you don't currently have, sort of to improve yourself, right? Angora keve sushi never sushi never chagobe le de never chagobe le de means, like it or not, it's an inevitable event, right? Never chagobe le means that act of having to be separated is certain. Deni never chidagi chebe wangi cheber guru means the Lord of Death, you know, will in a chebe wangi. So it says chebe. This it's glossing that the stuff we're done there. Chebe is an idiom. Chebe means to impose a punishment. Cheba is the punishment, and cheba means cheba is the verb, right? To you know, to apply a punishment by the power of, you know, imposing the punishment of death. That's going to occur. So he said you shouldn't wait for the punishment of the Lord of Death to instigate you, because that time it's too late anyway. In order without being instigated by the Lord of Death's punishment, right? Make that choice. Make that a conscious choice of your own. Mahuru, water, means not to something. Rather, you should go to the forest. Yeah. Then he says, means you should go to the forest and, you know, apply yourself energetically to the path to liberation. Okay. Then here it gives an example. These are villagers, and typically in feudal or, you know, classic historic times in India, certain geographical areas were under the authority of a local person, or the villages are sometimes even what is the word? Sorry? No, like a king could say in certain religious institutions, I grant you whatever this village or that village and the farms in that area are. Right, that, you know, whatever wealth they are able to produce, so that's a kind of tribute, a kind of tax, right? So it says, the cha means the tax or the tribute, which they must offer. Then it says, they don't give that willingly, right? It's the example in the story is, or in this, you know, in this simile is that villagers are not happy about having to, you know, part with some of the wealth gained by their toil, they don't have any choice. So nevertheless, they don't gladly and willingly bring the tribute to whomever they have to give it to. It's only when the threat of the punishment that they will receive if they don't pay tribute, that they actually hand it over. So that's kind of the image of, you don't separate yourself from your family. That's an unwanted event, and you won't take the conscious effort to separate yourself for a good reason. Rather than do that, you just wait until you have no choice, and the Lord of Death forces you to give up your relationships, right? So this says, cha, that tribute, dungelgi masir, it says that bar should be bar. Bardu means until. Until they are tormented by suffering, that is, unless they're punished for not having given the tribute, they won't give it until the threat of punishment for not giving the tribute. We shouldn't be like that. So anyway, that's meant to illustrate the message in this verse. Okay, we got two more. Dare I take a break, or what do you think?
5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Back on. Okay. All right. So now the last two verses. This is it's not appropriate. Talking about this. Oh, okay. So this section is actually only two verses. So the second one is it's probably on the same theme, which is encouraging a potential Dharma person to leave the household and go forth into the Dharma. So this one says, so it says, give up your attachment for, lesser activities, meaning worldly activities. Tomanine means that from I think tomanine is from the beginning, but I think here it means more kind of like right away. But then, and here it's missing the jingle, right? It looks like that then is like the then to teach or to reveal. It should be the then with the jingle, which is when but then. Remember I said that's the idiom, which is to resort to a an isolated place. Damba means saying this one is saying that that's advice, saying that it's proper to do that. Okay, so it starts out. Oh yeah, so this is now saying it's not just saying, well, I just can't part with my family. Right? So it's saying Niedu means close relatives. Nyavartango means I acknowledge that in order to be able to pursue the Dharma, I must at some point abandon it. I must, go out on my own and pursue the Dharma. However, Tetanayam means nevertheless, even so. Now here's the bukiete. There's also a jingle missing there, right? Bukiete means I'm going to I'm going to father children. Okay, bukiete means give birth to children, and kimgi kurpok. Kimgi kur means then, and the responsibility for the family, right? Kim is the household. Kur means duty. So it's saying, I'm going to raise a family. I'm going to have a family. I'm going to raise a family. And when the family that I've raised reaches adulthood and they're able to carry on with the family, I will then turn over the household to them and I'll be on my merry way and I'll pursue the Dharma. They said, that's what I propose to do. So Aryadeva was saying, no, that's foolish, right? So this is a Buddhist idea: is don't procrastinate. You don't have to wait until you finish or fulfill your social responsibility. I remember my cousin once told me, that the idea of being, the idea is, this sort of popped into my mind, which is to say that the ideas of being celibate monks and nuns are inherently flawed because they would lead to the termination of the human race. And it just really? Never not to go says, I will go into the forest, but not until I have fulfilled my responsibility. So this is not saying I won't. I'm not totally unable to do this. I'm just not ready to do it right now. Right? So again, he's saying that's not appropriate. So he says, "Cheni" means you. Okay, you who proposed this, path for yourself. Di-chene means having finished this. This means something. First I have to do this. This is something. This is important. I gotta, get my affairs in order, or this is something that I'm obligated to do. It's my responsibility to do this. I promise to do this, or whatever the reason is, and I'll do this. And then once I've taken care of that, then I'll be free and I can go. Di-chene. Sell water means definitely. Sell water means literally means clearly, but actually, it's an idiom which means I'm definitely committed to doing it, but not until I finish something else first, right? Diken is sell not to draw. Not to draw means I will go to the forest, right? Chasemna means if you have that thought, right? If you have that thought, then, okay, so this is someone's, you propose this to the person, go forth now and, pursue the Dharma, right? The person says, well, I will, but in a little while. First I have to do this. Then Aryadeva says to that person, that which having been completed, right? Ganshik, which means the thing which is done, right? The thing which having been done, you're going to then go forth, means here's the thing which having been done, then you will leave aside your family. Then what if you are proposing there's something that needs to be done before you're ready to go forth? He says, well, once you finish that, once you've completed whatever it is that you think is important to do, you're going to give that up. So why was that so important in the first place? Give it up. Don't put that barrier or that obstacle. Don't create that obstacle for yourself, because once you fulfill that, activity, you're still going to give it all up anyway. So don't create that hindrance for yourself. 感谢节呢，当教 means what is worth doing that once done, you're going to abandon it anyway. 得戒 means then to do that, to engage in that kind of activity. He says, what is the value, what is the benefit in doing that, right? Right? So what will you have accomplished? What will have been so important, more important than the Dharma, that you need to do it, and then once you've done it, it's no longer important. So you're making it important before you do it. Once you've done it, then it's no longer important and you can give it up. That's kind of wrong-headed. Okay, so it says, La Sokpa then is, in Chandrakirti's text, he says, you not only you father children, but then you have to raise them, and then you have to make sure that their lives are, put on the right path, and their life looks like it's, headed towards success. Then you could say, okay, well, I fulfilled my duties. Right? Dijene means that. Like fulfill your family responsibility. Selwate never. So here you say selwate is that particle te means clarifying or glossing selwate. Selwate never. So never means I definitely will then do so. But yeah, I'm gonna go. Don't worry, I'm gonna go someday. Chi means after that. Chi means later. Wembe nak. So here he's saying, what is the forest? Forest is an isolated place. Forest is a quiet place, away from society. That's a draw. Chao nyamdu semna. Then he says, chao gangshik. So that activity, that thing which you are saying needs to be done, that thing which that activity Ganshik jekyang. Jekyang means once completed, right? What is the thing which you're saying has to be completed? And once completed, well then, unquestionably, then misao means unquestionably, without question, undoubtedly, Dao is going to be abandoned, right? Just like you're making it important before you do it, then once you complete it, it's then no longer important. He's saying that kind of activity. Now here is this is Yetzavya on his own. Deche means desired. Desired result means a really worthwhile result, right? Deche means not desired in the sense of ordinary activity, but desired in the sense of really desirable from the point of view of Dharma. It means that thing which you say you have to do first and then you're going to walk away from, that doesn't actually, Jimba means to produce or to give rise to. It's not Jimba of giving. Jimba means to looks like produce. Jimba means that activity. That verb goes with jebu. Jimba means to give rise to a worthwhile result. That activity that you claim needs to be done before you go forth. That activity is still a worldly dharma activity. So doing it, insisting on doing it before you go forth is not going to actually produce any kind of genuine worthwhile result. Therefore, not going forth until you have done it. Then, putting it, doing it. You say it has to be done, and then actually taking the time to do it. What is gained by it? You're deceiving yourself essentially. Dangbone. So that tomanine in before is dangbone means from the very beginning. Doro rikso means you should just there's nothing more important than the Dharma, is essentially what it's saying, right? No matter what you're doing, no matter what you're in the middle of, no matter what you think is important in your current situation, if you're not currently pursuing the Dharma, the best thing you can do is just put everything down, walk away, no matter whether you're in the middle of something or not. Essentially saying that. And then he says, these are the examples that are given, these are a little bit funky. This one is saying someone who is a traveler, right? And he didn't go along with the rest of the merchants, and he picked up a rock and started to polish it. Or I think the way it's put in the English translation is make a square or a cube out of a rock or something. Anyway, take a rock and sit there and sort of rub it. And then the person asks, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm rubbing this rock." And the person says, "Well, okay, what are you going to do with it?" He says, "I'm not going to do anything with it. When I'm done, I'm just going to throw it aside." So that kind of activity that's the activity that represents the activity that you think needs to be done before you can pursue the Dharma. And then the other one is Shingtok. That's a misspelled version of fruit. Shingtok is usually without the head letter Shingtok, or just ta, second ta letter Shingtok. Is I believe is mango, right?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know? It's Tibetan for yeah, I think so. I mean, I've had all kinds of Tibetans tell me, no, really, is a different kind of fruit. That's a persimmon or something. But I'm not sure. I believe it just means a mango. So it says someone who there was a dirty mango, and the mango, it says mitame goba means something that is tainted or made dirty. Goba means tainted by some impurity. Trune, and then the person washes it, right? Normally we think, well, you wash it then you can eat it, right? They're saying, you're not going to eat it. You just wash it, then you cast it aside. Doroshin. So those are insisting on completing some kind of so-called important samsaric activity before you set forth into the Dharma is, you know, a mistake. Shino. Okay, so let me see if there's anything in here. Oh, don't be sorry, not to join. Larry also Chandakirti, so it's just a linguistic sort of point. So it says Ganshik Je, right? Then that which having been completed is then, you know, abandoned, left for others, and then you go and pursue the Dharma. So Chandakirti glosses that relative pronoun, Ganshik, two ways. The act itself or the person for whose sake you do the action. Because the action could be something that is to accomplish some particular thing or something which is done on behalf of another person. So he just takes the relative pronoun and, you know, interprets it two ways. So that's one, you know, comment on Chandakirti says. Okay, so what else? Okay, so here he says, yeah, here, this is Devan and Dichawa. He says, so he's saying, the fact that you say it's important to do it, and then once you've done it, you're going to leave it behind anyway. He says, what's the point of doing that? He says, Dewana Dichawa Mainda Nido. He says, therefore, you should conclude you don't need to do it in the first place. If it really needs to be done, don't worry, somebody else will do it. Let them do it. Nature della terne du chawar mirikpe chawa da chawa mahimba number chawa. Okay, so here he uses this is just Chandakirti using making a little statement which just kind of puts some fills in a little bit more. He says, therefore, della terne means making your decision to go forth conditioned by that, whatever that might be. And then do dawa. I mean, do dawa means to, allow that time to be, gone, used up. Actually, do dawa means to spend time, right? But it's the idea of that you're using up precious time that you have. And where the previous verse that was saying, you should think of your time as your enemy, right? So he says, giving yourself, excuses or reasons to use up that precious amount of time that your life still has, mirikpa is not proper, not appropriate, not suitable thing to do. And then he uses this phrase, Jawa dan Jawa mayim ba nambar jaba la kera. So remember it says langdor la kera. So there's a little passage. It's in it's a commentary to the Lama Choba ritual, and in the Lama Choba ritual, the author of the commentary is Yeshi Gensen. We read this. I don't know if you remember. It's a little meditation. It is a meditation. Do you remember this? No, we read it. So it's a passage that's meant to be used as an exercise for reviewing your motivation, right?
Oh yeah, of course. No.
Remember that?
Yeah,
Okay.
very well.
So in the beginning of it says, Langor jebe shira kyumse nieva. Langor jebe shira. It says we have the capacity to evaluate, our circumstances and make decisions about things that we should avoid and not do, and things that are worthwhile doing, and therefore we should do. And that's kind of a basic intelligence that is crucial for someone to be able to effectively pursue the Dharma. So this is another way of saying it, right? So it says, Jawa means to be done. Jawa Mayimba, that which is not to be done, or that which shouldn't be done, right? Jawa Mayimba, Nambar Cherba means to be able to investigate or to evaluate right and wrong. So they're saying having an ability to look at a set of circumstances, set of opportunities, and make a choice. I mean, this is the gift, the intellectual gift that we have to be moral human beings, is to look at something and to decide what is good or bad and make choices on the basis of that. And of course, the challenge is to be able to use that capacity, appropriately or effectively. But at any rate, it's an important, I'm trying to say, a capacity that human beings have. Now, much of like Kevarchata means here he's saying we should develop that skill. And here it's saying we should, in this case, it should be used to make the determination there's no worldly activity worth pursuing, in such a way that it prevents us or puts off the opportunity to pursue the Dharma. So that, right, I don't want to, anyway, that's a little phrase that John Kirti gives that sort of kind of drives home the point. Okay. I think we can let the rest of that go. Okay, now we're down to the last verse. Okay? So now this last verse is the last section, right? So this is section, section C in the outline, right? This is the final section of the outline for the first chapter. If we could go back to the very beginning.
Well, he actually goes to Roman numeral 3, right?
Oh, yeah, Roman numeral. Right? Okay, so that's it. So there's number 2 was how to meditate on impermanence, right? And then Roman numeral 3 is the benefit of having done so. And we read this verse. This last verse, I can remember. I didn't really dwell on it, but it's quoted in the Lamrim Chemo. Remember I think it's a beautiful kind of little kind of description of how to look at the topic of meditating on death. So it said, what is the kind of mind that you're supposed to cultivate? It's a fear of death. Remember we read it from the Lamrim Chemo? They said it's not the fear of the fact that when we die, all the things that we like in life are going to be lost. That's kind of the way an everyday person fears death, right? So that's not the point. That's not Dharma. But the fear was, and then it was like the fear that we would die before we were able to pursue the Dharma effectively, right? And then he goes down, and at the very end, he quotes this verse. And what's beautiful about it is this verse indicates, what this verse says is, if you practice this instruction effectively, you won't fear death. So that it's kind of come full circle, right? So you should you deliberately engender a sense of apprehension about dying, prematurely or without having done something with your life. And you should, that's a kind of concerned that you should, try to try to develop purposely. But he says if you do that, I mean, it's not like that's done for its own purpose, but rather it's meant to motivate you. If you're successful, if you motivate yourself, and if you do pursue the Dharma in a reasonably effective way, the benefit of having done so is that when you come to the end of your life, you die peaceful. That's what this verse. This is the last verse. So he says, so we'll read this, and I guess that's where we're going to end. So it says, Kete Dundu Natsu Joy Dik Tetana Yang Adan Tajiwa Chakna there's a Jupiter Java. This is Chandrakirti's comment about beginning verse. He says, his final verse, he said, use this, okay, so this is also in Gyaltsabje's text, right? He says, page 19, sorry. I just want to, this is going to the last class, so I want to cover as much of the material as we can. Okay, so it says, this is page 19 in Gyaltsabje. I'm going back and forth, jumping back and forth. The last one, right? So this is the benefit of meditating on purpose. Opinion need, right? Opinion is benefit, right? Okay, zhou means usually means a principal thing, but here it means it's the most important thing. So the most important thing that you can do with your life is to motivate yourself to, turn your back, whether it's metaphorically or literally, on ordinary samsaric life, and dedicate yourself to the Dharma. So this person is acknowledging this is whom Aryadeva is speaking to, and this is a person who still and always sort of can't get himself to accept the instruction. So he says, Dadan dagiwa la chakbe jigne drum minuso shena. So this is Dakdan dagiwa. Dagas means atma. Atma means self. Dagiwa means it's the what do you call it? The possessive of the self. So of the self means something that belongs to the self. It's not the self, but it's related to the self. Could be your body, could be, there are attributes of the self. Could be your thoughts, could be, inanimate possessions. Those are dagiwa, right? Dagdang dagiwa la chak. So dagdang dagiwa la chakba, in a way, is the root of samsaric existence, right? So, in the root mental afflictions, there are two formulations. One of them says there are 6 root mental afflictions. 5 of them are emotions, right? Desire, hatred, ignorance, pride, and doubt. And then the last one is views. Views means mistaken ideas or concepts. And so that 6th one can either be an all-inclusive category, or it can be separated into 5 kinds of views. And among the 5, the first one is this mistaken belief in a real self. And if you have a sense of a real self, then there are logically, it follows that you're going to develop the idea that there are things that belong to the self. So if there's an I, there can be mine. There can be things that are mine, right? And both of those things you have attachment to, right? You have an attachment to the sense of I is really kind of psychologically is very deeply ingrained in that it's what we would call egotism, right? It's a sense of you know, kind of your idea that you're the center of the universe. You matter more than anything, and you know, whatever. It's a very deeply ingrained, misguided idea. In one sense, when we have a kind of fear of death, one of the elements, or one of the psychological components that creates the fear is the idea that you are no longer going to exist following your demise. And so that idea, the mistaken idea that you exist now, but once you die, you will no longer exist, and that oblivion is terrifying. The idea that you will no longer be. That comes from that the place where you have this clinging to the sense of your own identity, your own misguided idea of what your identity is. Okay, so here, so that's what I'm saying is that's kind of that view, that particular mental affliction, which is a view, is in fact the ultimate source of all the other mental afflictions. And so therefore, the goal is to see through the error in that idea. And if you do, then none of the other mental afflictions will have any footing to arise. So here he's referring to that. There's a technical term for that belief. It's called, in Sanskrit, called Satgaya Drishti. So Drishti means view. Satgaya, Gaya means a collection. Sat can be interpreted in a number of ways. Can either be to exist, a collection that exists, or in Tibetan, there's a different interpretation of sat, which means that which kind of can become can undergo destruction, and so that's the idea of impermanence. So it's a collection of impermanence. So it's an interpretation that says the 5 impermanent heaps are the basis of forming an idea of a false idea of a real self. So we experience our own, physical and mental, aspects, and then largely from our own, mental, particularly from our own mental experience that we see as unique, and comes this idea, well, therefore I am unique. There is a real I. So anyway, so that's this name, that Satkaya Drishti is the name for the mistaken belief in a real self. Okay, so Dadandagiwa, in other, it says Numba Shemba is to wrongly hold that there is an I and a mind, a real I and a real mind. So here it says then, due to that mistaken sense of your own real individuality, here it's saying that your idea that somehow either it's a threat to your being, threat to yourself, to go forth into that that unknown life as an ascetic, that kind of is, here it's suggesting that part of the fear comes from the sense that you won't succeed, or it'll be too difficult, or you're giving up all the comforts of your ordinary life, and yourself, you don't want to impose that on yourself, so you'll just stay where you are because, you know, it's easier, that kind of thing. That all that's at play in this phrase. So then he says, so if you are so disposed that you have some hesitation to go forth, right? That's the way this is kind of the last gasp, right? It's saying your ego is the only thing that's holding you back. Then here he's saying, here is, you know, the final kind of instruction which should overcome whatever lingering, you know, doubts or hesitations you might have to pursue the Dharma. So here is saying, you know, all this, a lot of this ties to, you know, fear of, you know, the fear that your life would end and you didn't accomplish anything, or whatever other kind of, you know, misguided, you know, anxieties that you might have. Here he's saying, I'm going to put them all to rest, he said. Dani Chiu Nyam Semba, right? This is a, Dani Chiu means I will die. Or I am, actually the word is martyo. Martyo means I am mortal. Dani Chiu means I am someone subject to death. And Nyam Semba means the one who reflects on that, right? Who having reflected on his or her mortality, right? So the point of it was, think of it. We talked about the subtle impermanence and the rough impermanence. So her idea was saying the best way to do it is to combine the two, right? That, you know, life is really nothing more than this collection of instants in time, and, you know, let's not let them go by frivolously or uselessly, because they will end. You know, this continuum of our life will end, and if and when it does, if we haven't done anything worthwhile, our lives will have been for naught from the point of view of Dharma. So here it says, thinking about your mortality is the way in which to, is the best way in which to ensure that you don't do that you don't let your life go by meaninglessly. So it's a Gangla means the one who develops that thought, right? Then here, this is a key word here. This is, says, Ngebar Yogurba. It says, Yogurba means who has it, right? The has, the object of what is had is the thought. The thought, which means an understanding about the implications of your mortality. But then the word here, which is kind of tricky, is the ngebar. Ngebar, this looks like an adverb. It looks like it's saying definitely has, right? Ngebar yugyuba. But actually, and in fact, you'll see Getsubje kind of addresses that. He doesn't say ngebar. I actually put it in there because it's in the verse. But actually, in his commentary, look in the second line. There's brackets with a ra in it. Actually, in Getsubje's text, it says ngeba yoba. So is a ngeba yoba is not one who definitely has. Ngeba is not an adverb. Ngeba is a noun. And ngeba as a noun means the certainty or the determination, right? So it's not enough to just sort of in some, you know, casual or incomplete or imperfect way reflect on your mortality. You have to reflect on it to the point where it rises to the level of a conviction. So here, that it's actually an adverbial phrase. It means with certainty rather than definitely has. The one who has a thought of his or her mortality and has it with certainty, right? Okay, it's not the one who definitely has the thought. It's the one who has the thought and has developed it to a point of becoming a thought which is with certainty, with conviction, without any, you know, without any kind of, you know, am I right? Should I really do this, or am I just kidding myself? Or is it really this? Should this really motivate me to practice Dharma? Right? So, no such, you know, self-doubt. that person, then it says, Deni means that goes with the Gangla. And Deni means that person will, in fact, if you are really developed a sense of certainty about immortality, then the conclusion that you will draw from that certainty is nothing that relates to this life deserves me being attached to it. Not wealth, not family, not even my own, physical being, right? So he says that person who develops that sense of mortality with certainty, that person will in fact have abandoned his or her attachment. That's it. That's the goal. That's the goal of meditating on your impending death. Is therefore to think all of what is here. I mean, it doesn't mean that life is it's not Camus' existentialism that all of this doesn't mean crap, and you just have to live with that ugly thought. But rather, it's saying I shouldn't be, misguided in my attachment to this life. I should value it, but not for its, worldly opportunities, right? So if you think about your mortality, that will result in you having abandoned your attachment, okay? And that person who has abandoned all attachment for this life, Jida Layang Galajik. Then it says, why or how, for what reason would that person any longer have any fear, even for death, right? So it's saying that person who has given up attachment to this life, then when it's gone, when you actually do die, you don't feel like you're losing anything, right? You're feeling like you used your life, your mental. You create a mental, spiritual world for yourself. And then this physical, mundane existence becomes, in and of itself, of no real value other than it gives you the opportunity to cultivate the spiritual world. And so, you do what you do. You have whatever time, your karma is going to give you. And then make the most of it. And if you do that, then you have no reason to, you have no reason to have any regrets. Actually, one of the things that it talks about in the scripture is that the average person, the bad psychological state that they have when they face their death is all the regrets. So giving up attachment for this life frees you from those. You won't have any regrets. And you won't be afraid of dying. Then there's saying, there are different degrees of the contentment that this can rise to. In other words, if you really make great progress with your spiritual practice, you embrace death because it's you're going to a place in the future where who knows, you could be not to be dramatic, but you could be reborn in Sukhavati, for instance, or something really then spiritually satisfying. And so nothing to be worried about, nothing to be afraid of, just to look forward to. So that's the ideal. And you read in the Lamrim, they talk about, that at the very least, no regret. In the middling level, you can die peacefully. And in the highest, in the ideal, you can be joyful, leave behind, all the tribulations and problems that you had to deal with. And you're going to a place where you don't have to deal with them anymore. Right? Okay, so kind of that's the idea. So it says, okay. Now just a little bit, we can read, we got a few minutes left. Let's read the rest of Jetsu's commentary on this. Okay, Chiwami Takwa, there's a missing a sec there between Tak and Kwa, right? Chiwami Takwa Gomba Latsumba Chena means if you do if you do exert yourself in cultivating the impermanence in the form of your mortality or death, you will in fact overcome your attachment to self and sense of self, misguided sense of self, and the sense of things that belong to that self. That's a really, there's something that you could go on to about. It suggests that by cultivating impermanence, particularly at the level of subtle impermanence, then you begin to see that there is no real self, and that all there is your physical and mental existence as a living being, which is continuing for some period of time, and there's no self at all that is attached to it, so that the sense of concern relating to that will disappear. So that's a higher kind of level of understanding about impermanence, but could conceivably be taken that way, I think. Anyhow, so actually here he says, Dita, Dani Namchi Ngama Mechi. So he says, in particular, this is not using the language of Lamrim. In particular, I, right? It says, if you think I am mortal, right? It says, Dani Namchi Ngama Mechi. It's part of your mortality, your sense of mortality is there's no certainty of when you're going to die. It could have come any time. Mechi, on one hand, we should, not be surprised if it comes at any time. And secondly, we should also have a sense of urgency that it's coming very soon, whatever that time may be. So that's part of the Nyepachi Nyurdujipa, means that life is going by faster than we think. Nyamdu Semba Ganla. So the person who cultivates those aspects of this topic, Nyurdu Chua Takjaba, the person who, and here's this Nyeba, right? Nyeba Yerba is the person who has developed a sense of certainty, who has decided, because, no question about it. Takjaba means to make the determination, right? Takjaba, that death is coming soon, right? And therefore, no time to waste. And but then it means that person, right? Dunzi Tamjepang means that person is going to, give up all attachment, is what the verse says. And here he interprets it as saying, Dunzi means, usually this is actually in the Tibetan literature, it means social interaction is really what it means, right? But the Tibetans take it and give it a more sort of abstract meaning. So they say there's an outer Dunzi and there's an inner Dunzi. And both of them are obstacles to meditation. So the outer Dunzi, and they think of Dunzi as being some kind of sort of like noisiness, clamor, sort of, things that don't let you think clearly. So obviously interaction with other people, doesn't only mean that, but, just talk and, meaningless talk is something that distracts you. But the inner Dunzi is your own discursive thoughts. Your mind cannot become calm and still. And you just have all these ideas kind of popping up inside your mind all the time. That's an inner Dunzi. Anyway, but here I think the term is being used in the more conventional sense of social interaction. So social interaction, in fact, if you take I give you another sort of context, Asanga, and this is in the Lamrim, but I think most of the versions of the Lamrim that are inexpensive. When you reach the point about the Four Noble Truths, right? So there's the Noble Truth of suffering, right? Which you go through, and then there's the Noble Truth of origin of suffering. One element of the origin of suffering is karma, the other element is mental affliction. And relating to the mental afflictions, there is a topic which talks about the 6 causes of the mental afflictions. One of them is dunzi. So saying that excessive involvement with other people, meaning social interaction, like the idea of being, in the everyday world where you're bombarded with all kinds of, literally figurative noise as well as literal noise, things that sort of distract you or lead you astray, and confrontations that will cause you to become angry or to develop desire. So that, in that sense, social interaction is one of the factors, one of the 6 principal factors for developing mental afflictions. So here he's saying you're abandoning that, condition of ordinary samsara life, and going into an environment where you're free from those kinds of distractions, right? Finally, dagla, yang sibe chakpa, okay? That is really a big point here. So when you die, right? Right before you die is among the 12 limbs of dependent ordination, the 10th limb, siba, is bhava. Bhava, that limb of the 12 links, is that phase in your life, typically right before you die, where you're facing the end of your life, and then you start to have all kinds of thoughts. And the thoughts that you have at that point are going to activate the particular karma. It's kind of like it's going through, the vast, depository of your karmic seeds, and that thought process that you go through is going to pick out, it's going to pick out the particular karma that's going to be the one that determines what your very next life is. So that is here. It says, Dala yang sibe chakpa. Yang siba means punarbhava. Punarbhava means subsequent existence. So subsequent existence means rebirth. So, and typically the idea that you're attached to the existence that you have in this life, the sense of ego, I have this life, and in this life I experienced all these good things, and now that I seems like it's coming to the end of its time, then you want that I to continue, and that sort of attachment to that sense of self is the big factor in determining the nature of your subsequent existence. So that is the yang sibe chakpa. Dakla yang sibe chakpa means the sense of attachment that you have for your own being, which constitutes, or it represents, in fact, the idea that you don't want the I to die. You want it to continue, to be yang siba, continued existence, a further existence, a rebirth, right? So yang siba chakpa, you also down, but it says if you think about your mortality, and if you, in the process of doing so, this is sort of kind of implied, maybe, or an element of it is it can bring you to a point where you see that sense of self as being misguided, and therefore, then that kind of attachment you will be able to abandon, give it up. The idea is that I think it is suggesting that you will come to a proper understanding of what life is, who you are as a samsaric being, and so therefore that sense of ego will be diminished at the very least, if not, completely gotten rid of. Therefore, because of that sense of ego is, is not haunting you in a sense, right? But it's not tormenting you. Therefore, chida layang galajik. Here it's saying, because you've given up that attachment, especially the attachment that relates to the misguided sense of self, then you're not concerned any longer about the things of this life, much less death itself, right? So Chidalayam, even death itself, you would not have any concern about, let alone mundane things of this life, right? So it means you can be at peace, right? Jibapangne means then that fear is abandoned, right? Tarvatoba Gyurwe. So once you give up that fear that relates to this life's attachments, then that makes it possible for you to pursue enlightenment. And if you pursue enlightenment, eventually you can, in fact, achieve enlightenment. Tarvatoba Gyurwe na. So it's possible. It's possible. If it's possible and you apply yourself, it can, in fact, be attained. Therefore, Naksu draw down, right? Naksu draw means whatever concern you had about what you're giving up by going to the forest, or Budang Jawa, whatever concern you had about separating yourself from your family and your children and so on. Jipamigura means it will disappear. And you'll be able to go into the spiritual life, confidently and happily. Fair enough. And then these are two these are the two final similes. Kase du mevachavichu sorndu. It looks like it's aoja cheguju gasa. It's not. It's aoja cheguju ga juk sek and then pa jukpa. Right? You understand? Jukpa means in this case it means to put on. This is kind of a not important thing, but it's a cultural thing where in India and other cultures, the idea of wearing jewelry or certain kinds of precious things have a what should I say? They have some sort of protective quality to them. So here it says, so you put a ring on the finger. It's something like perhaps the gold of a golden ring, or maybe a jewel on a ring, that has the idea of sort of warding off poison. So the poison here is, a metaphor for attachment, right? So one of that is kase du mevachavichu. I don't know if in he says kase du or not. Bear with me 1 second. Yeah, actually he doesn't say this is coming from Chandakirti, right? And here Jetsa just says kase du mevachavichu. It says to remove any poisonous aspect to food, right? Mm-hmm. But the Chantri doesn't say anything about food for the first one. He just says, "Duk mevachavichu." It says to ward off any poisonous hazard or risk. So supposedly, wearing jewelry can have that ability. It's not like he's espousing that as a something to do, but it's just it's an image, right? And then the second one is about food, and it says kase dukjen dorwa. And the second image is food that has poison in it, poisonous food, which mistakenly might be eaten, right? And without unwittingly, here it says casting off poisonous food. So casting off poisonous food is the second image. And he doesn't really describe how those images are meant to be understood. So we're out of time. Let me just see if I can briefly give you what it says here. He says, he says, okay, the first one, he says, just as, all right, so there is this custom of putting on a ring, for instance, to ward off poison. Lakpa means to the hand, putting on a finger of your hand. So as people do that, right? Thinking it's a, has that, beneficial effect. 대신도 kebanamki means then now this is the how to be interpreted. Intelligent person. Nyomombe duk means the poison of the mental afflictions, right? Shombar chawecher mitapetushe jugo. They put on means they, they cultivate in their mind the thought or the conception of impermanence as a way of overcoming mental afflictions. So it's saying that meditating on impermanence, if it's done properly, really kind of detaches you. It is naturally will detach you from your involvement in this life's activities, and in so doing will separate you from those things which might otherwise, inflame the mental afflictions. And so meditating on impermanence has the ability of not eradicating the mental afflictions, but keeping them at bay, in that sense, overcoming them. That's the first one. Then the second one is yang jita kase duktan chiaba yonsu dorwe, means if you happen to have food that is has some contamination in it that's bad for you, he says if you give it away, right? If you discard it, right, then you are in fact doing something that is salutary, right? You don't ingest it. You're throwing it away. It's like it's like saying, well, leftover food is good for maybe a day or two, but after that, it could do you more harm than good. So throw it away. So food that you are not sure is poisonous, but could be. So throw it away just to be safe, right? He says, like that, he says, Geshi Sugurba. Geshi Sugurba means, this is a term which means that it will leave you in a more auspicious circumstance, right? Health-wise, in a more auspicious circumstance. And he says, like that, Deshindu, Chagba Tamje Yonsu Tangwe. Chagba Tamje Tangwe, the verse says that. If you're able to overcome all your attachment, then he says, Nyabar Lekpa Guru. Nyabar Lekpa is that technical term for liberation. Nyabar Lekpa means literally that of which there is nothing higher. So the highest spiritual goal. So that's here. Chandrakirti, interprets these two similes in a very straightforward way, whereas Gesabje just sort of alludes to them. Okay, so there's just a little bit left in Gesabje, and I'll just read it just to finish it off. Okay, so he says Be kachile. Be means certain editions, certain printings of Aryadeva's root verses. That means as is found in certain editions. Right? In fact, that's what we have. Right? Means some, in other words, Gesabje is saying it should be nyebayer. Because I take it as a noun, not as an adverb, right? He says some editions have nyebayer, which looks like that adverbial phrase. He says, even that, Chekyang, Shebala, Gawamendo. It says you can give another explanation as what looks like an adverbial phrase, and it won't be contradictory to the other, version, which leaves it more correctly as a noun. I happen to think that the Nyabara is probably correct. I think because it's the ablative, making it an adverbial phrase with that noun in it that Cater just says is now never, right? Okay, I talked about that.
Mhm.
All right. So here he makes reference to the fact that there are different editions. Okay, so that's it. Now he has this sort of concluding phrases. So this is saying this topic, if you relate it to the Lamrim instruction, there is one point which says chi ngeba. Chi ngeba means death is inevitable. Death is certain. Nobody is not going to die. We're all mortal. He says that means we're under the power of the Lord of Death. That's the very first verse, in fact, is addressing that. We should accept that. We should not hide from that. We should not kid ourselves that somehow we can, somehow there's a passage in the Lamrim say you can't outrun the Lord of Death. You can't buy off the Lord of Death. There's no magic potion that will, free you from the Lord of Death. So just face it, you're gonna die, and accept what that implies in terms of how to lead your life. So that was number one. Namchi ngeba meba, right? Namchi ngeba means the second most important thing is that we don't know, the time of our death. So we know we're going to die. We say, well, everybody knows they're going to die. We all know we're going to die. You ask the most, worldly person out there, are you going to die? Then nobody's going to say, no, I'm not going to die. But, in the abstract, they're aware of it, but they don't think about it in a way that, affects how they live their life. The second point is namchi ngeba meba. Namchi ngeba meba means despite the certainty of your death, the next important thing is to recognize that death could come at any time, and we have no idea when that is. We can't, unless we're clairvoyant, we don't know when that time might come. And if we're in reasonable health, we might deceive ourselves into thinking, oh, it's not going to come anytime soon. That's a big mistake. We should live every day as if it's our last day. And as the one sutra, one of the Buddha's sutras was, we should live every breath as if our breath is our last breath, and make the most of it that way too. So yanda yandu sambar, and by the way, in Lamrim, that topic of the uncertainty of the time of death, that's the one that's most difficult to incorporate and to fully appreciate and have it affect us properly, according to the instruction. Sambar Jaka here is saying we have to do that. We have to. This is what this chapter is all about, because we have to contemplate mortality. Dila chi lekwatuna. Dila chi. Now here chi is the way we were talking about. This instruction, lekwatuna, means if you comprehend the instruction well, correctly, lam gongma nam kyang beba meba kyela. It says, then it sort of sets the stage for all the other meditations. It will take away the idea of attachment to this life, and that's kind of essential for you to be able to effectively practice any of the other more, what should I say, higher meditation topics. And he says, so meditating on this well facilitates attaining the understandings of later topics. So it means it's indispensable, and should not be, glossed over or diminished in importance. He says, otherwise, Shenduna means, in other words, if you don't develop the proper level of understanding, Gewe Shenyin Poto is Suwanta, means that Gewe Shenyin Poto is one of the early Kadampa teachers. He said, it says, until you're able to develop the proper understanding about impermanence, right? Means it is an obstacle. Lamgak means it's an obstacle for any other elements of the path, for developing an understanding about any other elements of the path. Tokpakyewa means it will prevent you from developing understanding of any of the other topics. Therefore, I don't know if this is part of Pudoa's statement or not, but here this I think to me is kind of the, what I get out of this whole chapter is Aryadeva was saying not enough Rakwe Mitakwa, not enough to practice Rakwe Mitakwa. Also Chava Mitakwa. Chava Mitakwa means subtle impermanence, right? To whatever degree that you can, kind of develop that sense where you kind of, if possible, even some kind of experientially think of yourself as, constantly in a state of flux, constantly moving towards the end of your life, moment by moment. So it says, rough impermanence and subtle impermanence, both, yundendu gombachao, means cultivate them in such a way that they, or continually, yundendu means continually cultivate them. Gombachao. And then we have a final concluding verse. So this is benefit of practicing impermanence. Nyekur means nyeva and kurti. Nyeva means gain. It means attachment to wealth, the attainment of wealth, gaining wealth, being, obsessed with prosperity. Kurti means honor. Always want other people, to think highly of you. That's a really deep one too. That's nobody wants anybody to think that you're a bozo or right? The thought that somebody thinks you're like nobody, it hurts your ego badly. So it's a tough one to overcome. Not caring whether people, make fun of you or not. That's tough. So Nihor Sebe Chinwa means the bond or the fetter of attachment to gain and honor. Jeje means it cuts that fetter. Meditating on impermanence. If you meditate on impermanence and you overcome attachment to this life, you can be, you can be your own best judge about who you are and what you are, and you don't rely on other people to evaluate you for you. You can do it yourself. So having suffered that fetter, go to an isolated place. It means at least a place where you're not, immersed in samsaric, distractions. Drup means practice. Privacy of your own room can be an isolated place if you make use of it properly. So it will sever that fetter and it will urge you. Gulma chok means it is the highest or the best then goad, right, or instigator, or encourager, you can say, right? Not a very smooth word, but the idea is gulma means urging you. It's the highest thing to urge you, to spur you on to make effort to practice in isolation from ordinary samsara. And then he says, Surakwingi Samai Damba. And this is the, Samai Damba literally means the highest secret of all the scriptures. That's kind of, I don't know, it's not typically thought of as impermanence as being some kind of secret instruction. But, I suppose you could take it in a way that it means that, I don't know, you figure it out. I'll let you mull it. Anyway, he says that Surakwigi Samai Damba Ni. So Samwa can mean something which I'll leave it. I don't want to speculate too much about it. Then Togmar, so therefore Togmarchiwa Jesudrambao. Togmarchiwa Jesudrambao means it's kind of the initial Dharma practice. It is the starting point for real Dharma practice is to be mindful or to practice recollection of death. Sheba, that is Duitzik Sheba, means that is a summary verse for that the Jetsunji writes at the end of this commentary. And then the next is just the title of the first chapter is meditating on it. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. How many sessions do we have? 6?
6.
Okay. So there's pleasure coming. I don't know how much you got out of it, but I got something out of it. So I'm happy for have taken the time to come and pretend to explain these verses to you. And I hope you weren't completely bored. Okay. So we're gonna have to take a break. I'm traveling. I'm gonna be away for a while. And I've been talking to Andy, and we hope to pick this up again. I'll just give you briefly. I'm at a stage in my life where I want to try to kind of tie things up, loose ends, and sort of make my understanding of Dharma kind of have the most impact on my life as I can. And so I want to get to the point where I'm really focusing on really the essence of Mahayana practice. So the essence of Mahayana practice is bodhicitta and right view. And as I don't know, not everybody was here, all of the classes, so just my reason for picking this text is that these first 4 chapters of Aryadeva's text, in my estimation, are prerequisites for being able to develop bodhicitta and right view in a really effective and meaningful way. So that's the whole purpose of this subject. I mean, in and of themselves, they're very useful, practices. But this is the reason why I selected them for this class. So we still got 3 more to go, and then I hope to sort of tie them up and show you how the understanding of impermanence and the other 3 chapters then allow you to develop a really well-informed compassion that is necessary for bodhicitta, and also a kind of understanding about the nature of your existence, so that you can begin to cultivate the idea of emptiness. So you can really, if you believe in a real self, if you believe in that there are elements of your existence that are, actually satisfactory and that you can be happy with them, if you believe, that you're the opposite of impermanence, I don't think you can cultivate the right view of emptiness. You can you can listen to instruction about it. You can, abstractly or some, some conceptual way, maybe know what the subject is about, but not experiential. So all those mistaken views have to sort of be flushed out, and you have to have in their place an understanding of impermanence, suffering, and the lower school's view of selflessness. And if you have those, then it's very easy or much easier, or that's kind of this real starting point for teaching about emptiness. At some point, I'd like to start that discussion. So, may we live long enough. Okay. Yawa di yao sanam yeshe tozo shin sanam yeshe lejo tamba kuni toba. Okay, I'll leave them alone because I already ate up too much time. Thank you.
Thank you.